All right, so move on to the next segment. Should the Boston Celtics entertain a trade involving Jaylen Brown being traded to the Milwaukee Bucks in exchange for Giannis this upcoming NBA offseason? So the answer to that question, no. I don't believe that the Boston Celtics should entertain a trade with Jaylen Brown being traded to the Milwaukee Bucks in exchange for Giannis. At this point, you can't split up the dynamic duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Now, I've in the past, I was a big critic on this podcast about the duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But if this trade was 3 to 5 years ago, I would be all in for it. But based off of the success that Tatum and Brown have had together, there's no point in splitting up this duo. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're like 1A, 1B, two elite players. And they both have brought a lot of playoff success to one of the most historic franchises in NBA history in the Boston Celtics that have already won 18 NBA championships. They have had several trips to the Eastern Conference Finals together. Tatum and Brown have. They have had 2 trips to the NBA Finals where they won their first championship together in 2024. And Jaylen Brown was the 2024 NBA Finals MVP in that series between the Celtics and the Mavericks. We cannot forget that. So, looking at this trade, it would be pointless because Jaylen Brown has already proved that he's what he's truly worth to the Boston Celtics. That huge contract that he got a few years ago, he showed he's worth every nickel, every dime, every penny based off of the production that he had with the Boston Celtics this NBA season. He helped the Boston Celtics become the second best team in the Eastern Conference without Jason Tatum, who was still recovering from a torn Achilles throughout the NBA regular season. Yes, the Boston Celtics blew a 3-1 lead against the Philadelphia 76ers in the first round, but Jaylen Brown overall proved that he is worthy of sticking around in Boston for the long haul. Plus, we cannot forget that Jason Tatum missed Game 7 due to precautionary reasons for his sake of the future. But I don't get it. Like, I'm not even a Boston Celtics fan, but the NBA media wants this duo of Tatum and Brown to split up so bad. And yeah, you see the beef with ESPN analysts with Stephen A. and Jaylen Brown, their ongoing saga that they got going on right now. You got Kendrick Perkins jumping in on First Take, trying to make Jaylen Brown look like the bad guy, revealing texts from former Boston Celtics players about Jaylen Brown's character on TV. I'm not a fan of that. You either cover the sport and leave the drama elsewhere or don't talk about it at all. That's how I run the podcast. But as I digress, I also feel like the NBA is taking Jaylen Brown's words out of context of how he feels about himself being in Boston or possibly wants to be out of Boston, because he expressed in his own words that this season was his favorite season of his career after being eliminated by the Philadelphia 76ers in the first round after blowing a 3-1 lead. I think Jaylen Brown's words were mixed around and taken the wrong way, because you got to look at it. The Boston Celtics were an afterthought in the Eastern Conference. They weren't even having any high expectations heading into the regular season, and they overcame a lot of adversity, a big roster turnover, and they became the second best team in the Eastern Conference. Plus, Jaylen Brown was somewhat in the MVP conversation for at some point of the NBA regular season, averaging 28 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. So you can't question why Jaylen Brown said this was his favorite season thus far in his NBA career, based off of everything that happened. Plus, he was the star player of the franchise this NBA season. But Giannis is a top 5 player in the league. Don't get me wrong. Not sure if the trade of a possible swap of Brown going to Milwaukee and Giannis coming to Boston really makes anything any different for the Boston Celtics, or makes anything different for the Milwaukee Bucks for their rebuild. And I don't think that really giving up Brown. Okay, let's go back. If you get Giannis to Boston without giving up Tatum or Brown, then yes, do it. But if you're doing a swap for Jaylen Brown coming to Milwaukee and Giannis coming to Boston, what's really the point of it? Because in my opinion, you got 2 star players in Giannis and Tatum. Clearly, Giannis is the better player than Jason Tatum. But how does that make them get over the hump in the Eastern Conference? How does that make me feel that they have a better chance of defeating the Cavs in a 7-game series? How does that make me feel they got a chance of defeating the team that took them out in the second round last year in the playoffs in the New York Knicks? I don't think that puts them over the edge to possibly win another championship in Boston. I think they're better off doing that with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, that have a lot of chemistry together in the Eastern Conference, and their success shows it. So for the Bucks trading Jaylen Brown, or for the Bucks trading for Jaylen Brown, how does that help for their rebuild in Milwaukee? Because you'd be in the same spot that you'd be in with Giannis right now in Milwaukee. The Bucks, if you're going to trade away Giannis this summer and really start your rebuild, You're going to have to trade Giannis away to a franchise that's a contending team that has true assets to send back to you, that can also send several draft picks back to officially start the rebuild in Milwaukee. If you just do a swap, you're not doing yourself any services, and it's just a waste of time. But I think what's best for the Boston Celtics is the NBA offseason. They run it back with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for next year. During the offseason, during the summer, you just find a better big man, a better center that's a good overall rim protector. Clearly, they're missing that with the big roster turnover that they had last summer when they traded away players like Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. Yeah, those were some aging players, but they had big contributions to that Boston Celtics team that helped them become a contending team year in and year out and helped them win the championship back in 2024. So you got to go back to what made you successful. Find a center that's a good rim protector, like a stretch big that can possibly shoot some mid-range shots or some three-point shots possibly during the NBA offseason. Make some trades to improve the front court, because I think the front court needs work. I'm looking at players that could possibly be traded to Boston this summer, like a John Collins, or depending on how the Oklahoma City Thunder feel about their future with Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein together, maybe trade Isaiah Hartenstein to Boston this summer. You need to bring in an isolation scorer off the bench to help with the rotation. Don't get me wrong, the Boston Celtics had a tremendous bench during the NBA regular season, one of the best bench units in the league. I think they were averaging 35 points or more on a nightly basis during the regular season, which is phenomenal. But I think they need a strong isolation scorer coming off the bench to help players like Tatum and Brown that's going to play a lot of minutes next NBA season together. So while those guys are resting, bring in a strong isolation scorer. Io from the Minnesota Timberwolves, I don't know if his contract is up or not, but that would be a great grab for the NBA offseason if the Minnesota Timberwolves don't hold him. But overall, I think that's what the Boston Celtics need. Improve the front court, get a big man, a big stretch big that can be a good rim protector as well, get a good isolation scorer off the bench. There is no need of going into these or really paying attention to these rumors and possibly entertaining a trade with Jaylen Brown being swapped to Milwaukee in exchange for Giannis. So I think Jaylen Brown should remain in Boston. I think Giannis should be traded elsewhere to a contending team, but this trade doesn't make sense to me. But those are my thoughts on if the Boston Celtics should trade Jaylen Brown to Milwaukee in exchange for Giannis this upcoming NBA offseason.